You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Clothes for Chiro, Legacy Wealth Management, Posture Screen, Chiro Thin, Imaging Services, Zingit Solutions, Peter Goldman's Zone School of Healing, Everest Coaching Systems, Universal Tractioning Systems, Rhino Coaching, Chiropractic Jobs Online, and Chiro Matchmakers. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 79 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm your co-host Luke Millette. Here's your host, Jim Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. David Fletcher, and he talks about his technology with the Chiropractic Leadership Alliance, and that is CLA. So if you want to know more about what Dr. David Fletcher is up to, stay tuned. So David, what is your chiropractic story, and what really influenced you to become a chiropractor?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I've loved being, someone who is interested in systems and in health and in logic and in outcomes. Ever since I was a kid, I loved exploring and all the rest of it. My journey probably was not going to take me towards chiropractic. It was probably going to take me, towards physics. I was a math major in university, and prior to that, as I was growing up, I had a really good athletic, youth athlete, and was taking the usual knocks and grinds. And, I'm not so sure what the relationship was to that, but my benchmark, Jim, was that all of a sudden, or at least in a very short period of time, I started to develop a very, very progressive asthmatic experience. And, parents took me through to the pediatrician and through the medical world, and the source of improvement was not there. They actually were giving me a drug at the time, which was known as Isoprel, and it was liquefied adrenaline, and it was just as bad to take a squirt of this thing to open you up as it was to struggle with an asthmatic response. At least I felt so anyway. And so one day, as the story goes, one day my father and our family was going up to my uncle's place, which was north of Winnipeg, which is where I grew up. And my Uncle Bill was a dairy farmer, so we're not talking exactly, living in academia. And he looked at me, and he looked at my father as I was struggling, and my father's name is Charlie, and he said, "For God's sake, Charlie, take that kid to a chiropractor." And we had gone to a chiropractor, and interestingly, Jim, he was Palmer trained, and had really done quite well for what he was offering us, which was back and neck services. But the truth of the story was that when we went back and we went and asked him to be a chiropractor and to care for me because I was ill, not sore, all of a sudden he started to act as if he was trained as a chiropractor and started to adjust me. And instead of worrying about my curved spine, he was adjusting my subluxations, and I became well under his guidance. And the story was that as I moved forward, I was sort of moving myself towards a life in medicine, choosing the early path. And because of my experience, and because I really wanted to live that very, very organized life and logical life as a chiropractor instead of working in a hospital and doing those things, I was drawn to the simplicity of it, but the outcomes, which were spectacular. So I got into it thinking it was a little bit more than back and neck problems.
That's such a cool story. And off camera, we talked a little bit about, building a career as a chiropractor. In how many years?
Well, it's high 30s now. I guess 37, 38. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Nine.
And one of those things that you enjoyed the most about it, you shared with me. Would you mind sharing that with our audience?
Yeah, you know what? I think that one of the greatest joys I had within my practice life was gaining that certainty, was just having that knowledge that when we met someone who was under our need or who was subluxated, that we had exactly what it took to care for them. And, there's so many different derivations of what made my life in practice as fulfilling as it was. We served so many people. We served so many families. And, I don't know if there is ever a golden age of chiropractic. I think every year is a golden age of chiropractic. But for me, the gold was that I came out of CMCC, and as my career was being shaped, I almost had to deconstruct what I knew were my limitations, and engage the storyline of people that were, and they were very available. And I hope that this era has availability as I did, but they were very available. I was a great friend of Reggie's and Sigafus and Sid Williams, and these were people, and Jim Parker, who you could approach and you could learn from. And they didn't necessarily tell you how to, and you're going to laugh at this, Jim, position your landing page so that you got better likes and better click-throughs. These were guys who would sit down and talk to you about, the vivification and the ability of the innate response to, change a life and change the world. And I think that if that was the golden age for me, I look forward to where the golden age is going to be, because the purity of chiropractic is what sells. And it's not being a community multidisciplinary clinic that I have found was the easy path. I found the easy path was to tell the story, adjust the subluxation, invite others to come and visit you, and keep doing it over and over again.
So what would you say makes you unique in the chiropractic world?
It won't be my hairline. But what I would say was unique. Well, these days I think I'm in an exceedingly unique position, because I get a chance to run one of the great iconic companies that was established by great iconic chiropractors who I got a chance to work with for 20 years before I took it over. I run CLA and own CLA. And CLA was born and bred through Dr. Christopher Kent and Dr. Pat Tempo. And in the early years, I was the clinical advisor for them. And so I learned in my years of working with them how to organize my life around the chiropractic message and technology. And so these days, as we put forward the congruency of the message of technology, of scanning for the subluxations, you start to realize how important it is in 2018 and 2019 and 2020 and further forward, how chiropractors today have to have this interface between today's technologies and the timeless principles of healing built into the storyline that they're telling each and every patient and each and every family member. Because in today's world, although palpating and adjusting are as irrelevant as they were in the earliest of days, there's an expectation that because of our technological advances, the chiropractic needs to be in that technology-based healthcare model. And I think that CLA really advantages that, I think, better than anything that's out there. And I'm not just touting it because it's ours, but if you take a look around, we have been true to the principle of analyzing through the neurofunctional state the subluxation. And if I was to read the tea leaves as to where chiropractic is and going forward, it's going to be through a neurological story, not through a biomechanical story.
So what's been some of your greatest challenges at CLA?
Well, I think that running a business that influences a tremendous number of offices means that we have to be listening at all times. And you guys know better than anyone the diversity that's within chiropractic. So I think one of the great challenges is staying the course, which is sort of a story that I think most practitioners, I wouldn't say wrestle with, but get challenged with on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of shiny baubles out there that you could move in sort of an awkward direction towards. Jim, you and I were chatting, and it's those pulls, especially when there's more month than there is money, to try and sell your soul to things like DCMD practices and rehab programs and all the things that we could do, but that actually are very distracting for when you want to care for people in a subluxation centered model. And I'm not suggesting those are wrong paths, but as we were talking about also, Gina, it's just easy to do it the right way, and you make a hell of a lot more money, and it's just easier. But you asked about CLA, and I think that in that reference point, it's just staying on point. Our core values are interesting because when we established our core values, the first and top foremost core value we have at CLA is chiropractors first. We are solution drivers, and we are relentlessly innovative. Those are our three top core values. And I think that one of the challenges in any technology industry is you must lean forward. In other words, there's no value, if you're going to be an influencer, to position yourself to try and simply do good, acceptable service. You have to be challenging those comfort zones, challenging those better practices, challenging the innovation that is demanded in a profession that's growing like ours. And so, Luke, I don't know if those are challenges or opportunities. I guess, those of us in the Zen movement might figure it's a little of both. But the realities are is that the challenges, and I guess we could go down on a political conversation here too, but the challenges are very evident these days that if you are in CLA and you are a Chiro CLA, and we have thousands of our doctors around the world, we stand for something that's pretty clear. I mean, our URL is subluxation.com. And, we stand very clearly for the idea that, the best place for chiropractic is in a salutogenic model. And there's a whole world of chiropractors out there that are defying and denying the presence of the subluxation. And, I want to be very inclusive of their opinions, meaning that I don't want to dismiss them because we grow from learning, but we have to also hold the line and say what makes us unique is our ability to be real as a chiropractor, not surreal as a glorified physiotherapist or athletic therapist. So those are challenges that I think we all own and that are part of the CLA journey.
So what would you say is one of the most important things to happen to chiropractic in the last 10 years?
I think that the awakening of research towards recognizing the influence that chiropractic has in two areas, both of which I enjoyed being part of that dialogue and support. Number one, I think that the development of chiropractic as a parental option to bring children that are sensory disorganized and kids that are on the spectrum or ADD, ADHD models. I think that we're looking at very much the application of a subluxation-centered system of where we're looking at nervous systems that are distressed and not necessarily pain-based or otherwise. So I think this movement towards function versus pain-based modeling, which has always been the birthright of chiropractic, don't get me wrong, in the past 10 years, I see that there is more of a youth movement within our profession to embrace that storyline. And I think the second is that much of the research is moving away from biomechanical structural, confirmation. We've kind of, worn that one out, or we're thinner anyways. And we're now jumping into the really cool territory of looking at brain-based functionality, looking at not even outcomes associated with symptoms or pathologies, but looking at function, looking at how brain-based functionality is associated with well-adjusted people, looking at a movement that I'm deeply involved in, which is the adaptability movement, looking at how technology confirms that the adaptive ability of the individual is so influenced by either the subluxation or the adjustment. It's quite amazing, and we can track that. And, I'll say that one of the great advantages, and this was where I'm really proud of the direction that I took within CLA, was that 4 years ago we made a decision that we were going to do cloud-based acquisition of the data from all of our thousands of offices. And we now carry the largest tranche of subluxation, or at least recovery-centered, patient-based data that has ever been collected, which means that we can go to research.
So what would it mean for the profession if more people knew about and utilized CLA?
Oh my God, do you realize that, we have millions of data points that are sitting there right now, Luke, and if more people were utilizing the insight, which is the name of our technology, and we're drawing, not only the best practices for their practice, but sharing the data of the ability of all ages and all sizes of people being adjusted, we could change the face of the conversation in this world. We're not talking about anecdotal outcomes. We're talking about epidemiological changes that confirm that the power of chiropractic is not limited to the individual. It's a societal problem when people are subluxated.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I've seen like the trends of, chiropractic people pushing for like this more evidence-based model, and what does that look like to me? What does that look like to like the, potential chiropractic client? And what does that look like to the practitioner actually producing, what I would think, CLA produces an evidence-based type protocol to let people know we've cleared out the subluxation. You can rescan and see that the body's actually adapting.
Yes. I think that the number one thing that provides is very simply is the confidence of the chiropractor to recommend the right care plan. And I know that sounds pretty boring, but the truth of the matter is that confidence and that certainty is exactly what is missing in so many of our colleagues. And because they don't get that confidence and certainty that the subluxation, or at least this neural distress interference pattern exists, and because they aren't aware of how they're interacting with it, they get caught up in compromise. And because they compromise their outcomes, they compromise their care plans, and they do, they manage care differently than they could or should, whether too much or too little. And, the realities are this, and I've been quoted quite strongly on this comment, and it sort of brings it to the practical, is that you get paid to the level at which you operate and communicate with certainty. And that's just a bottom line. And so one of the biggest problems that I see in chiropractic is that chiropractic no longer provides the economic, necessities for many of our young practitioners. And there's a lot of people leaving the profession because they just can't make it anymore. That's a travesty. There is so much ease in developing the right kind of practice, and there is so much certainty that you can deliver that people will flock to your door, that you can be, this amazing influencer in a community. And all you have to do is just tell the story as you know it and confirm the story as it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what you just said there is the people that are out there in the early stages of a career have some type of a blockage that puts them into a position that they can't do the thing that they think they're supposed to do the right way. And if all of it is, David, is getting people in and adjusting them and knowing the threshold that you can provide those services and know the fair exchange of value that you can render those services, that's really the ease of practice that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that one of the easiest starting points is this, and it's a starting slide in many of my lectures, is that, the most confident and most successful chiropractors are those who understand the devastating effects of the subluxation on human health and potential. And, until you really believe that you have a role in someone's life, and look, I'm not taking away the noble approach of helping somebody through a terrible event in their life, which could be back pain, neck pain, or elbow pain for that matter. Those are really noble causes to help other humans through that. And then there's managing a subluxation, which is where that person is disconnected from their genius, is that they're disconnected from their ability to be the human person that they were designed to be. And so I'm not dismissing that people have these wonderful outcomes, but when you accept the role as being a chiropractor, it gives you the opportunity to write the story of probably being more than healthcare, but operating in a human and human development or human potential movement. And that is something we are well trained to do because, and I could go into this adaptability principle, but when you are skilled and you have this understanding that you can adjust a subluxation that resets the coherence within this functioning nervous system, you don't have to look too much further to watch people get out of their unlocked state and start to watch that arousal of what experience is all about. It's quite amazing.
So where do you see the chiropractic profession finding itself in the next 20 years?
Well, it's funny you say that because, again, I've been in it 2 times those 20 years. And I think at all times they're like, we're at this critical juncture. You know what? I'm going to tell you this. I don't think chiropractic's going away. First off, I think there's way too many wonderful people involved in chiropractic. So the apocalyptic perspective that if we don't get it right, we're going to fall off the map, I don't think that's real. I think that we will stumble. I think that We will hurt ourselves along the way, and I think that we'll grow. I think that if chiropractic does have a future, it will be in developing its uniqueness of where others can't replicate what we do. I mean, at one time, I think they thought that the manipulation was something that was a controlled act that only a chiropractor could do, and before we knew it, everyone was doing a manipulation. But an adjustment is based upon this complexity of an incoherent nervous system and the complexities of reorganizing through a care plan. And I think that that's something that chiropractors have this unique model to do. And I think that if we accept the role of being this trusted advisor, where we not only support the person through the adjustment, but we give them the advice it means to build a foundation based on the subluxation, but not stop there, to allow people to go into a multi-faceted approach of learning how to look inward in their life versus outward and try and find solutions. I think that if we allow ourselves to be that necessary force to care for people in need and care for people for a lifetime, there will be a place for chiropractors for the rest of our days in everywhere. And I'll finally say that although this has been very much a North American or Western styled experience, the future of chiropractic is as interesting as emerging markets are in business. Emerging areas where there are millions of people who want to feel well without having a drug-based approach, that's, I think, where we're going to find our path too.
So before we continue on asking you about your personal life and what you do to market, where would you say that these emerging markets may be?
Well, I think we don't have to look very much further than our southern border or south border if you're Canadian like I am. But Mexico is a huge community. I know that my friend Rob Scott and Gilles Lamarche just did a exploratory tour over to Hong Kong. We know that CLA has a number of client offices in the Asian face of things, whether it be Singapore, Malaysia, or otherwise. And we know that those are areas that are craving for it. Brazil is another massively populous nation that is starting to embrace chiropractic. We see the European sector growing, although it's highly regulated, which is good. I mean, we're a profession. But at the same time, there are harder paths there to try and reframe or deconstruct many of these manipulative sciences as being simply chiropractic. So, Jim, to answer your question, I think that the story of emerging markets is that, goodness knows, you could have an emerging market in a small suburban community out of Toledo, Ohio, because half the time they never heard the true chiropractic story. But I think that in big countries' decisions, you're going to look at emerging first world communities, such as I've said. And I know that there's this massive thrust by the Rubicon and by Life West especially to go to India. So take a look at the number of people that we can influence with those stories.
Yeah, it's absolutely astounding when you think about it, getting outside the four walls of chiropractic, which is our central hub here, which is North America. And that's really what we do with Chiro Hustle, is we want to get the chiropractic message outside the four walls of chiropractic. And early in our new year, we're going to be doing probably 16 to 20 straight episodes of Chiro Hustle International, where we're going to be doing, week upon week of international chiropractic tone and getting that cultural conversation going and open some of these doors and, open some of these minds and ears and say, hey, this is the conversation that you guys need to tune into, because this is becoming a global matter, and it's not just inside these four walls, which are, North America.
Well, I'll throw an interesting little comment into that international side. CLA has clients in 40 different countries. And, most people think of it as being just localized. Now, granted, in some Central African countries, we have one unit. But the point is that there are chiropractors, in a variety of different countries, which are so fascinating to know that the story that we talk about, which is technology interfacing with this timeless principle of healing, is something that is getting worldwide even through our adventure in CLA.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Close for Chiro, Legacy Wealth Management, Posture Screen, Chiro Thin, Imaging Services, Zingit Solutions, Peter Goldman's Zone School of Healing, Everest Coaching Systems, Universal Tractioning Systems, Rhino Coaching, Chiropractic Jobs Online, and Chiro Matchmakers. Let's hustle.
Could you touch upon your speaking career a little bit and the types of speaking engagements that you do?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. I guess one of the joyful things for me in my life was that, I grew up in a very academic experience. As I said, I come out of a math background, and when I graduated from CMCC and I went into practice, I actually ended up going back into a postgraduate fellowship, and so I learned, got involved in some early research, and I have a fellow in the chiropractic support sciences. Now, I don't use that, to learn to tape ankles or to help people. But what I do is that it taught me to do a tremendous amount of rigor in academia and otherwise. So much of what I enjoy teaching can be at the CE level, or bringing these neuroplastic conversations forward. And it's allowed me to really interact with many of the research teams, either through CLA's interactions with the different schools, like Life New Zealand, Life West. We have a really great role of supporting those research teams. And, and my speaking sort of is this most interesting thing, Luke, because one of the things that I love to do is I love to build this idea of being wildly successful as an entrepreneur. Chiropreneur, I think, is the current term. I think that I love the idea of being confident and competent clinically. I really think that's such an attribute of being in a profession. And then the third thing is that I love professional development. I mean, I love the idea of what we were talking about is being coached well. And, although I don't coach at this stage because it's just not my path, I used to be this wildly proficient coach. I love the idea of teaching the emerging, we'll use that term again, new chiropractors how to be successful in their thinking. And so we put on a program called Total Solution, not far from Grand Junction, just so you know, down in Colorado Springs area, Florissant, up Highway 24 there. And so we've been doing this for 20 plus years. That we teach a 3.5-day program called Total Solution. And it's amazing because it ties together everything I just said there in the high country. And then I don't like to do a lot at state associations unless they're great state associations. So I come and do that, and I speak at, I'll tell you, last year I was out 38 weekends. So that'll give you an idea of my speaking schedule.
Yeah, and one of the cool things that a lot of people might not know, but when we first met, David, you were at a Mile High speaking, and we had a chance to meet you early on in that organization's process of growth. So if it wasn't for you and your speaking engagements, and for us having a thirst for the chiropractic story, we would have never had an opportunity to cross paths. So, sometimes it's divine intervention.
Yeah, it is. And listen, it would be wrong if I didn't, pass kudos back at you. I remember our first interaction. You were filming your first film. And I was so impressed that there was this lay person, if you want to use that term, who was embracing chiropractic at the level at which these superstars in chiropractic, which I was invited to speak at, which I think was Mile High 1. We were watching this guy who was just so passionate about chiropractic through his own personal experience, really put it all on the line. And the fact that you have moved this into the realm of Chiro Hustle, and that you're now the number one podcast that's going on, I mean, high five, kudos to you. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Well, I think that bringing value to the cultural message of chiropractic was something even the most profound chiropractors couldn't amass. So I think that somebody had to come in as a third party, eye on the process and say, this is the story that needs to be told. And I think that that's really what set us apart from any other productions that have ever been done trying to tell the chiropractic story was we let it rip, man, and we let it be told the way that the chiropractors would be proud of hearing. And, 20 years from now when they go back for historical reference, they'll look at that piece and they'll say, wow, those guys got it right.
Yeah, I know they will. And, it's funny because you talked about going back in time, and we talked a little bit about, my journey up this chain. And some of my most cherished, recordings, and unfortunately in those days they were on cassettes, as they are now, but we're either having conversations with Reggie or taping or listening in on stories that Reggie and Sig were talking about. And those were moments that were almost, irreplaceable in my journey. And I think many people will do the same with Chiro Hustle as it goes forward.
Well, thank you.
So tell us some of your favorite marketing strategies. How do you use media to your advantage, whether it be social or traditional?
Well, it's a great question because we grew up as a company, and I'm speaking here now from CLA's perspective, of being, in the trade journals and, going to every trade show there was and taking out ads where you could. And of course, that is a zero-sum game. We still go to trade shows mostly because we have so many clients we want to meet with them. And of course, it's great to introduce our technologies to an ever-expanding group. However, on a media side, we rely on Facebook at this moment. I know that, for those of you listening, you can stop gagging right now. Insta is a little new for us in our world. I don't mean CLA. I'm talking about our responses to it. We do email. We do email, and let me share this with those who are doing it. It's great to have a budget. So I'm very thankful that we have a budget that allows us to hire the right people. But there are people out there that are so much smarter than me when it comes to, it's kind of like me trying to do my own personal accounting. Don't do it. Could I pick up a manual and fight my way through and figure out, some accounting software? Sure. But why would I when there are amazing people out there who can walk you through what it takes to put together a great campaign, building a landing page, building a funnel? Those are things that are very, very, very skill specific. And so we rely on experts to help us position our message. And it's hit and miss a lot of times, but isn't that the way media and marketing is that you have to be present, you have to be relevant. And here's the other thing is that if you're not out there, you're talking to yourself. And although I like to listen, not that often to myself, it's not the passion or the mission. Our vision for CLA is to have a insight technology in every practice in this world. And, I'm not going to do that unless I have a way in which we can reach out there. So podcasting, interviews, we do a podcast that's called The Insightful Chiropractor, which helps train our doctors, but it's also really cool to listen to. We have webinars that we put out there, but, mostly Facebook is our social platform at this moment anyways.
So do you have a favorite app or technology to keep you engaged with either your clients or other chiropractors?
One of the things that's very difficult to integrate all of the different ones, like Hootsuite was out there for a while, and trying to find these sort of integrators. We use Zapier right now, which allows us to, do some things. I have to share with you that going to the mail list can be very frustrating because even our own clients sometimes get mixed up and they don't open our emails or our ratings go down. So we use a mail integrating program called Mailshake that's very, very solid. It's a little slower to get it out there, but you get great returns on it. I haven't embraced Twitter as far as a platform goes. I probably should. I have a lot of followers on Insta and I have a lot of followers on Facebook, etc. But I think I'm probably just loathing the day of where I spend my life, staring at a 3x5 screen. But I think that's where I think our world is going to take me. I think that as CLA evolves and we do that lean forward innovation, we're going to be very much part of how the conversation and sharing scans goes about. And I think we'll use all the platforms like social and like emails and LinkedIn and otherwise to really continuously share the big news of chiropractic as it looks through a scanning technology as well.
And one quick thing I wanted to mention about you being in the community so much. I don't think we've been to a seminar yet where CLA didn't have a booth there.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that. Listen, those are more than anything an acknowledgement, because we go to the ones that matter. And I want to share this because it's really not about CLA, it's about chiropractors. And Jim, you were talking to me about a younger, she'd only been out 19 years, practitioner you were interviewing before me. And she was a pediatric focused practitioner. And you said something that was really relevant. And you said, she goes and does these talks in the community, not to be promotive, but more to bring the story out there. And when CLA usually goes to a trade show, it's for exactly that reason. It's so that we can support those who are putting on the programs that matter, like Berkshire's, like Mile High. We go to events like Lyceums at Sherman. We fly over to New Zealand to go and do Lyceums in New Zealand. We do the Wave, and we meet our clients, and we have great times, and we hug and we laugh, and we talk about it, and I answer questions, and people ask me about silly stuff that I should be doing in the system. But more importantly, we do that to show our support for the path that matters. And I think you do that as well, because if you're seeing me there, we're seeing you there, and that's what matters, is get the storyline out there.
Yeah, the cool thing is about what you just said there is back to that point about the gal that's been out 19 years and practicing is making the position to just be heard instead of being desperate for numbers. And I think that comes with maturity of understanding what value you actually bring with your product, that you're not always hungry for the next sell, but you are hungry for the next ability to share.
Oh, beautifully said. I think that anybody can smell need or hunger that's misappropriated. One of the great things we teach at Total Solution is this idea of what we call the 5 Ps. And it was something that Dr. Jim Temple originated, and we continue teaching it with 2018, 2019 derivation. But, if you look at the 5 Ps and imagine it as being a triangle that's supported, at its base, it goes from philosophy to principle to psychology to procedure and to prosperity. And you can well imagine that if you flip that upside down, Jim, and you start to have prosperity as your foundation versus and then you end up with this mongrel philosophy that's wavering all around at the top. It's going to fail every time. But if you get it right and you build this foundation based upon the philosophy of what life is supposed to be and who you are as you interact with it, and I choose chiropractic as my expression of my life path, one of the things that matters is that when you build from that foundation, then the psychology, then the procedures are inevitably going to be in line with the philosophy. But you know what the outcome is? Prosperity. Is that, and I think I am really proud of this, because out of stupidity or laziness, I can't decide which, I always had a cash-based practice. I just never took insurance. It just didn't mean much to me. And listen, I was in the Mercedes 80s. It was when people were able to charge $300 for an adjustment and get paid for it, in some user rate. I always adjusted for what the community could afford and bear, and we always charged the most that we could. And what I mean by that was we were never the cheapest adjustment in the block, but we were always the most fair. And and to put it very comfortably, I made a fortune. And I don't mean that in any grandiose or other way. It was so darn easy. And you and I talked about this, Jim, beforehand. I love chiropractic, but I also love doing great business and love doing it the right, efficient, and easy way. And I never cut any corners. I just absolutely learned that the most cost-effective way in which you could operate a practice and do the most cost-benefit for the patient who's paying was adjust them. And so we never used any electrotherapies. We never used anything that wasn't our hands, and we just adjusted people. And it was just easier that way. And, when I got full, I got an associate. When that associate got full, we got another one. It was a pretty simple business.
So tell us about some of your hobbies and things you like to do in your spare time. What do you like to read? What do you like to listen to?
I love to be out in the community. I love good wine. So I don't know enough about it, but I love to believe that I can taste a good wine periodically. I think that one of the things that, and it's interesting you say that, one of the things that I probably have let go was I was a voracious reader, and I find that many times now I don't use my time as wisely as I did. So I'm going to look towards getting back to reading. One of the things that I do is I like to listen to podcasts. There's a surprise, right? I was thinking about a couple of podcasts that I'd share with your listeners that I have found enjoying and it was more from the business entrepreneur side at this moment anyway. So obviously I like Insightful Chiropractor, which is one of the things that we do, but how I built this, and it's all about how budding entrepreneurs turn their ideas into, $1 million ideas. So I thought that was very cool. And Planet Money, which deep dives into interesting business issues, but it's really fun to listen to. For instance, there was an episode on free love and free money, and they were talking about the Oneida Silverware Company. So, figure out how that works, right? So I think that one of the joys I have is my kids are at a wonderful time in life where they've just left our house, and so Nancy and I have a chance to really, of course, they're never far away from us, but we have a great chance to sort of grow our company, and so our hobby has become learning how to be better at running our own business, and I think that's fabulous too.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear, people's personal side to their lives and allow our audience and our listeners to be able to get like a sneak peek onto what a person's interests are a little bit, because it actually gives a heartbeat to the conversation, not just the talking head. So thank you for sharing a little bit.
Oh, my pleasure.
So we're actually starting to get to the end of this episode. So do you have any website links or social media links where people can find out more about you or CLA?
Absolutely. So, the easy one is to go to the Facebook page, which is open to the public, and that is the Chiropractic Leadership Alliance. Pretty straightforward. Join us there. I do a Facebook Live it's called the Fletch Flash, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. on Eastern Time. So I usually try and touch on things that are of relevance, and with FBLs you try and keep it kind of short and novel. Most importantly, for those of you who use our technologies, we have what's called the Insight Forum. Please, it's a closed group, and I bring that up for you guys because we want you to be part of that group. I have a chance to work with what Jim and Luke, you guys work with, which is Barbara Eaton's team. Went through a 56-day boot camp. We're deeply involved in EPIC practice and deeply involved in AMP practice. So I encourage people to really look at those different thought leaders and encourage the use of their technologies as well. I want people to know to go to our website to learn more about the adaptation principle. We have a huge resources section. There's a tremendous number of white papers, most importantly, deep dives, webinars, anything that's there. It's all public. And that's at insightcla.com. You can get there through subluxation.com, but insightcla.com is our URL. And finally, I think that you can catch me when I'm speaking, is that I'm, as you guys have noted, out there quite a bit, and I would love to share with you guys in a one-on-one perspective my view of the world. So catch up with us that way as well.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up this episode, unless there was anything else you wanted to touch on that we did not ask you about.
No, I you know what? One of the great, I'll finish with my thought, is one of the great thought leaders outside of our profession who is a genius in his own right was Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was the great mythologist who understood that how we conduct our lives is really almost, when I say predictable because we're human. And he made the quote, there's sort of three words that mattered, and there were famous Campbellian words, and he said, follow your bliss. And of course, it demands that you understand what makes you blissful. And I think that when chiropractors stop trying to chase to find out what makes them happy, and many times I'll say this, I get happy when I, make 3 green lights in a row. But blissful is not being happy. Blissful is when you are in peace with this idea that you are in that zone where you make life difference for everyone. It's a joyful experience. And if I could just encourage people to trust the journey that they're on, to realize that it's all about the learning they're having, and know that if they allow bliss to come into their decision making, being a chiropractor can be one of the most blissful experiences that ever existed on this planet. So I encourage everybody to keep striving forward and find out the bliss that I have experienced, which has been my chiropractic journey.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps this episode up. Dr. Fletcher, I want to thank you again for being on our show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and feel free to reach out anytime, and can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, Dave, thank you so much. It's really cool getting to know you over these past couple of years, and thank you for being a guest today on the Chiro Hustle podcast.
Thanks again for inviting me. I do appreciate it.
All right, see you next time.
You bet.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.